Marcus Chen stood barely 5 feet tall in the massive corridor of the Galactic Xenological Institute, his small frame dwarfed by the towering Zeltharian researchers who moved around him like living skyscrapers. At 17, he was the youngest human ever admitted to the prestigious institution, and every day reminded him of that fact in the most humbling ways possible. The corridor buzzed with conversation in a dozen different languages, most of which Marcus understood perfectly. His gift for languages had earned him his place here, though few seemed to remember that when they looked at his youthful face and diminutive stature. "Look, the human child is back," rumbled Kextar, a Zeltharian whose blue-scaled hide rippled with amusement. Standing nearly 9 feet tall with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds, Kextar commanded respect wherever he went. Perhaps he should be in the nursery wing instead of bothering real researchers. The group of senior researchers around him laughed, their various forms of mirth creating a cacophony that echoed off the metallic walls. Marcus had heard worse, but it still stung. He clutched his datapad closer to his chest and continued walking toward the Department of Xenolinguistics. "I heard Director Vashati only admitted him because of some political pressure from the Human Colonial Authority," added Dr. Kriyan, her insectoid features clicking with disapproval. "Diversity quotas, you know. They needed to show they accept all species, even the primitive ones." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to keep walking. He had learned early in his time at the Institute that responding to such comments only made things worse. Better to let his work speak for itself, though so far few seemed willing to listen. The Xenolinguistics Department occupied an entire wing of the Institute, its laboratories filled with the most advanced translation matrices and communication arrays in known space. Marcus had dreamed of working here since he was 12, when he had successfully decoded an ancient Martian dialect that had puzzled linguists for decades. That breakthrough had earned him recognition in academic circles, but here among the galaxy's elite, it seemed like child's play. Dr. Vashiti, the department head, was hunched over a holographic display when Marcus entered her office. The elderly Centaurian's 4 eyes tracked different streams of data simultaneously, her silver hair flowing like liquid metal around her elongated skull. "Ah, Marcus," she said without looking up. "I trust you've recovered from yesterday's incident?" Yesterday's incident. Marcus suppressed a grimace as he remembered the humiliation. He had been presenting his preliminary analysis of the Corvan trade languages when Dr. Thexmore had interrupted him, claiming that a human's neural structure was simply too primitive to grasp the nuances of Corvan syntax. The entire room had erupted in what Marcus had learned to recognize as Corvan laughter, though it sounded more like mechanical grinding to human ears. "I'm fine, Director," Marcus replied, though his voice carried more tension than he intended. "Have you considered my request to examine the specimen?" Dr. Vashati's eyes finally focused on him. All 4 pupils contracting in what Marcus had learned was a sign of serious consideration among Centaurians. The specimen had been the talk of the Institute for 3 months now, ever since the deep space exploration vessel Wanderer had brought it back from the uncharted Vega sector. "Marcus," she said carefully, "the specimen is not a simple translation exercise. Every xenolinguist in the Institute has attempted communication with it. Dr. Raltheo spent 2 weeks mapping what he believed were vocal patterns, only to conclude it was merely making random sounds. Dr. Kriyan's team ran it through every translation matrix we have, with no results. But have they tried? The creature nearly killed 3 researchers when it first arrived," Dr. Vashati interrupted. "It took 6 security officers with neural disruptors to subdue it. It's confined in a high-security habitat for good reason." Marcus had heard the stories, of course. The specimen was roughly the size of a large earth tiger, with 6 legs and what appeared to be fur that shifted colors based on unknown stimuli. Its eyes were described as unnerving, showing an intelligence that seemed almost accusatory. Most disturbing of all were the sounds it made, complex vocalizations that followed patterns suggesting language, but in a structure so alien that no translator had been able to make sense of it. "I know it sounds presumptuous," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully, "but I've been analyzing the audio recordings from the other attempts. I think there might be something everyone else is missing." Dr. Vashati's expression was unreadable. "You've been analyzing classified recordings?" "The public portions," Marcus said quickly. "Dr. Ral Theo's preliminary report included several audio samples. I've been running my own analysis, and I think the vocalizations might not be language in the traditional sense." "Explain." Marcus activated his datapad, and a three-dimensional acoustic model appeared in the air between them. "Every translation attempt has assumed the specimen communicates linearly like most known species. But what if it's using multiple simultaneous channels of communication?" The model showed wave patterns in different colors, weaving through each other in complex spirals. "I found evidence of at least 4 distinct vocal frequencies operating independently. It's not making one complex sound, it's making 4 simple sounds at once." Dr. Vashati studied the display, her 4 eyes tracking the patterns. "Interesting hypothesis, but theoretical analysis is very different from actual communication. The specimen has shown no interest in communicating with any researcher." "Maybe because they've been trying to translate its words instead of understanding its intent." The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Dr. Vashati waved her hand, dismissing the holographic display. "The review board specifically recommended against allowing junior researchers unsupervised access to the specimen." Marcus felt his heart sink, but before he could respond, Dr. Vashati continued. "However, I could arrange supervised access. Dr. Chen Hai from the biology department has been requesting a linguistic consultant for his behavioral studies. Perhaps a collaboration would be beneficial." It wasn't ideal, but it was an opportunity. Marcus nodded eagerly. "When can I start?" "Dr. Chen Hai conducts his observations during the 3rd shift, when the specimen is most active. You'll begin tomorrow night." Marcus left Dr. Vashati's office with a mixture of excitement and nervousness churning in his stomach. He had 24 hours to prepare for what might be his only chance to prove himself at the Institute. The biological research wing was quieter during the 3rd shift, with only essential personnel maintaining the various life support systems. Marcus found Dr. Chen Hai in the observation deck overlooking Habitat 7, a massive enclosed environment designed to accommodate the specimen's needs. Dr. Chen Hai was also human, though he had been at the Institute for over a decade and commanded considerable respect in xenobiology circles. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and eyes that held the kind of weariness that came from years of dealing with the Institute's politics. "So you're the prodigy everyone's been talking about," he said without looking away from the habitat below. "I hope you're ready for disappointment. That creature down there has confounded everyone who's tried to understand it." Marcus peered through the reinforced transparent wall into the habitat. The environment was carefully controlled to mimic the conditions found on the planet where the specimen had been discovered, with reddish lighting and a thin atmosphere that shimmered with humidity. Strange, twisted plants that looked more like coral than vegetation provided cover throughout the space. At first, Marcus couldn't see the specimen at all. Then movement caught his eye, and he realized what he had taken for a shadow was actually the creature itself. Its fur had shifted to match the dark purples and blacks of the artificial rocks, making it nearly invisible. "Remarkable camouflage," Marcus breathed. "That's nothing," Dr. Chen Hai said. "Watch this." He activated a control panel, and a small mechanical probe descended into the habitat. Immediately, the specimen's posture changed. It rose from its resting position, all 6 legs moving with fluid grace as it stalked toward the probe. Then it began to vocalize. The sounds that filled the observation deck were unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. They were musical and harsh at the same time, flowing together in patterns that seemed almost familiar but remained tantalizingly beyond comprehension. The specimen circled the probe, its vocalizations changing in response to its position. "It's been doing this for 3 months," Dr. Chen-Hai said. "Every time we introduce anything new to its environment, it responds with these sounds. Dr. Raul Theo is convinced it's just territorial behavior, but I'm not so sure." Marcus watched, fascinated, as the specimen completed its circuit around the probe. The vocalizations continued, but now Marcus could hear what he had suspected from the recordings. Multiple frequency channels operating independently, but in harmony. "It's not territorial," Marcus said quietly. "It's investigating." "What makes you say that?" "The pattern of movement and vocalization. It's not trying to intimidate the probe or drive it away. It's trying to understand what it is." Dr. Chen-Hai raised an eyebrow. "And you can tell this from watching it for 5 minutes?" "I can tell this from listening to it," Marcus corrected. "Dr. Chen-Hai, I think it's trying to communicate. Not with us necessarily, but about the probe. It's describing what it's seeing." As if to emphasize his point, the specimen moved to a different position, and its vocalizations shifted accordingly. Marcus could hear the change in frequency and pattern, subtle but distinct. "If that's true," Dr. Chen-Hai said slowly, "then it's been trying to communicate with us for 3 months. And we've been ignoring it." The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Marcus watched as the specimen completed its investigation and settled back into its resting position, its fur slowly shifting color until it once again blended perfectly with its surroundings. "I'd like to try something," Marcus said, "but I'll need access to the habitat's communication system." Dr. Chen-Hai hesitated. The review board was very specific about not attempting direct communication. The specimen's aggression levels are still considered unpredictable. "I'm not going to enter the habitat," Marcus assured him. "But if I'm right about the multi-channel communication, I might be able to respond in a way it recognizes." After a moment's consideration, Dr. Chen-Hai nodded and gestured toward the communication panel. "You have 5 minutes before security does their rounds. If this goes wrong, we both face disciplinary action." Marcus's hands moved quickly over the controls, adjusting frequency outputs and modulation patterns. He had spent hours studying the specimen's vocalizations, and he thought he understood at least the basic structure of its communication method. He began with a simple pattern, 4 distinct frequencies that mimicked the basic rhythm he had observed in the specimen's responses. The sounds emerged from speakers throughout the habitat, carefully modulated to avoid any aggressive overtones. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the specimen's head lifted, its large eyes focusing on the speakers with unmistakable intelligence. It responded. The vocalizations that came from the creature were different from before, more measured and deliberate. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he was listening to what might be the first intentional interspecies communication attempt from the specimen. "My God," Dr. Chen-Hai whispered. "It knows we're trying to talk to it." Marcus quickly adjusted his response, trying to maintain the frequency patterns while varying the rhythm slightly. The specimen's reply came faster this time, and Marcus could hear something that sounded almost like excitement in its complex vocalizations. "We need to document everything," Marcus said, his voice tight with concentration as he continued the exchange. "This could be the breakthrough everyone's been looking for." But even as he spoke, he could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Security was making their rounds, and his time was almost up. The specimen seemed to sense the change as well, its vocalizations becoming more urgent. Marcus made one final attempt, putting everything he had learned into a complex pattern that tried to convey continuity, a promise that the communication would continue. The specimen's response was immediate and clear, a pattern that Marcus somehow understood meant acknowledgement and anticipation. As the security guards entered the observation deck, Marcus shut down the communication system and tried to appear nonchalant. But inside, his mind was racing with possibilities. He had made contact with an alien intelligence, and for the first time since arriving at the Institute, he felt like he truly belonged there. The real work was just beginning. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of clandestine late-night sessions and carefully documented progress. Marcus had convinced Dr. Chen Hai to extend their observation periods, citing the need for comprehensive behavioral analysis. What they were actually doing was conducting the most sophisticated interspecies communication attempt in recorded history. Marcus had developed a basic vocabulary of frequency patterns that the specimen responded to consistently. Simple concepts like attention, curiosity, and acknowledgement were becoming routine exchanges. The creature, which Marcus had privately begun calling Echo due to its responsive nature, showed remarkable adaptability in learning to modify its communication style. "Look at this," Marcus said during their latest session, pointing to the acoustic analysis on his screen. "Echo is starting to separate its frequency channels when responding to us. It's adapting its natural communication method to make it easier for us to understand." Dr. Chen Hai leaned over the display, shaking his head in amazement. 3 months of failed attempts, and in 3 weeks you've established functional communication. The implications are staggering. But their success was drawing unwanted attention. Word had leaked somehow that the human Prodigy was claiming progress with the specimen, and the Institute's senior staff were growing skeptical of the unofficial research. "It's impossible," declared Dr. Kriyan during an impromptu department meeting that Marcus found himself reluctantly attending. "The creature shows no signs of true intelligence. What Chen is interpreting as communication is likely just trained responses to audio stimuli. Like teaching a primitive earth animal tricks," added Kextar with obvious disdain. "The human sees patterns where none exist because he wants to justify his presence here." Marcus sat quietly in the back of the conference room, watching as his work was dismissed without serious consideration. Dr. Vashati had insisted he attend this meeting, though she had warned him to remain silent unless directly questioned. The acoustic analysis shows clear evidence of intentional communication, Dr. Chen Hai argued from his position at the presentation podium. The specimen modifies its vocalizations in direct response to specific frequency inputs. The pattern recognition is too consistent to be coincidental. Pattern recognition that exists only in your imagination, Dr. Thexmore rumbled. His massive form dominated one entire side of the conference table, and his forearms gestured dismissively at the holographic displays showing Marcus's data. "I have spent 40 years studying xenolinguistics. No species discovered to date communicates through simultaneous multi-frequency channels. The very concept is physiologically impossible for most known life forms." "Perhaps that's because we've never encountered a species with this particular vocal structure before," Marcus said quietly, unable to remain silent any longer. The room fell silent. Dr. Thexmore's multiple eyes fixed on Marcus with what could only be described as hostile amusement. "The child speaks," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tell us, young human, in your vast experience with xenolinguistics, what makes you believe you can succeed where your superiors have failed?" Marcus felt every eye in the room on him. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to stand and face the assembled researchers. "Because I'm not trying to force Echo to communicate like us," he said. "I'm trying to learn how Echo communicates naturally." "Echo?" Dr. Kriyan's mandibles clicked with what Marcus had learned was the insectoid equivalent of scoffing. "You've given the creature a pet name. How appropriately childish." "The name reflects its communication behavior," Marcus replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "The specimen doesn't just respond to input, it elaborates and expands on the concepts we present. It's not echoing, it's conversing." "Prove it," Dr. Thexmore challenged. If this creature is truly communicating, then demonstrate something beyond simple stimulus-response patterns. Show us meaningful exchange of complex information. Marcus glanced at Dr. Chen Hai, who nodded encouragingly. I'd need access to the habitat's communication system during this meeting, Marcus said. Granted, Dr. Vashati said before anyone could object. But understand, Marcus, if you cannot demonstrate genuine communication, this line of research will be terminated and you will be reassigned to basic data analysis duties. The stakes couldn't be clearer. Marcus's entire future at the Institute hung on the next few minutes. The group moved to the observation deck overlooking Habitat 7. Echo was visible today, its fur a mottled brown and gold that blended with the artificial vegetation. Marcus noticed immediately that the creature seemed more agitated than usual, its movements restless and its posture alert. The specimen appears stressed, Dr. Chen Hai observed quietly. The increased activity in the department may be affecting it. Marcus approached the communication panel with hands that trembled slightly. He could feel the weight of everyone's expectations and skepticism pressing down on him. If he failed here, not only would his own career at the Institute be over, but Echo would likely be transferred to a regular xenobiology lab where it would spend the rest of its life as a subject for invasive research. He began with their standard greeting pattern, 4 distinct frequencies that had come to mean attention and peaceful intent. Echo's response was immediate, but Marcus could hear tension in the complex harmonics that suggested the creature was aware something was different. Remarkable vocal range, admitted Dr. Ralphio, but I still hear only sophisticated animal responses. Marcus ignored the commentary and moved to the next phase. Using patterns he and Echo had developed over their weeks of communication, he attempted to convey the concept of many observers and importance. Echo's response was longer than usual, involving frequency shifts that Marcus had never heard before. The creature moved closer to the speakers, its large eyes focused intently on the observation deck. It knows we're watching, Dr. Chen Hai said with obvious excitement. Look at its posture, the way it's positioned itself, it's performing. Animals perform for food rewards, Kextar observed. This proves nothing. Marcus took a deep breath and attempted something he had never tried before. Instead of using the simple patterns they had established, he began constructing a complex narrative using Echo's own communication structure. He tried to tell the story of his arrival at the Institute, his struggles with the other researchers, and his desire to understand Echo's true nature. The effort required him to layer multiple frequency channels while modulating rhythm and tone to convey emotional context. It was the most sophisticated communication attempt he had ever made, pushing both his equipment and his understanding to their limits. Echo's response stunned everyone in the room. The creature began vocalizing in patterns that clearly mirrored Marcus's structure, but with elements that were distinctly different. It was telling its own story, Marcus realized. The story of its capture, its confusion at being brought to this place, and its attempts to understand these strange beings who had imprisoned it. My God, whispered Dr. Vashati. It's not just communicating, it's sharing its experiences. But Echo wasn't finished. The vocalizations continued, growing more complex as the creature began describing something else. Marcus listened intently, trying to parse meaning from the alien patterns. What's it saying now? Dr. Chen Hai asked. Marcus's face had gone pale. It's talking about its home, about others of its kind. But there's something else, something urgent. The patterns shifted again, becoming more frantic. Echo moved restlessly around the habitat, its vocalizations taking on what Marcus could only describe as desperate urgency. It's warning us about something, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something happened to its world. Something terrible. You're anthropomorphizing, Dr. Thexmore protested, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Marcus turned to face the group, his eyes wide with realization. What if the planet where we found Echo wasn't its homeworld? What if it was a refugee? The silence in the observation deck was broken only by Echo's continued vocalizations, which had now taken on a rhythm that sounded almost like mourning. "That's impossible," Dr. Crean said, but her mandibles had stopped clicking. "The geological surveys showed no evidence of recent catastrophe." "Recent in geological terms," Dr. Chenhai said slowly. "But what about recent in biological terms? Decades, maybe a century?" Marcus returned to the communication panel, his mind racing. If Echo was trying to warn them about something, he needed to understand what. He attempted to construct patterns that conveyed concepts of time, of past events, of danger. Echo's response was immediate and terrifying in its intensity. The creature's vocalizations became a complex symphony of frequencies that painted a picture of destruction, of fleeing, of loss beyond imagination. "It's describing the end of its civilization," Marcus breathed. "Its people, they were wiped out by something." "By what?" Dr. Vashati demanded. Marcus continued his exchanges with Echo, pushing deeper into the creature's account. The patterns became increasingly complex as Echo described something that moved between stars, something that consumed worlds and left nothing behind. "I need more time," Marcus said urgently. "There's something specific it's trying to tell us, something about this threat." "This is speculation," Dr. Thexmore protested, but his voice was shaky. "We're interpreting random vocalizations as some kind of prophecy." "Then explain the consistency," Dr. Chenhai challenged. "Marcus is receiving specific responses to specific inputs. The creature is clearly trying to convey complex information." Echo had moved to the center of the habitat and was now vocalizing continuously, its body rigid with what appeared to be extreme agitation. Marcus could hear layers of meaning in the sounds that he couldn't quite grasp, concepts that were just beyond his understanding. "It's trying to tell us something about time," Marcus said, frantically adjusting his communication patterns. "About cycles, about patterns that repeat." The creature's response sent chills down Marcus's spine. He could hear desperation in the alien harmonics, a sense of running out of time. "We need to expand this communication," Dr. Vashati said decisively. "If this creature possesses information about existential threats, the Institute's full resources should be devoted to understanding it." "You're all falling for an elaborate delusion," Dr. Thexmore said angrily. "This human child has convinced you that animal sounds are some kind of cosmic warning. It's absurd." But as he spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the Institute. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in red as an automated announcement filled the air. "All personnel to emergency stations. Long-range sensors have detected an anomalous object approaching the system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. All personnel to emergency stations." In the sudden chaos that followed, only Marcus continued listening to Echo's vocalizations. The creature had gone silent except for a single sustained frequency pattern that Marcus recognized immediately. It was the pattern for "I told you so." Dr. Chenhai grabbed Marcus by the shoulder. "How much of its warning did you understand?" "Not enough," Marcus replied grimly. "But I think we're about to find out what Echo was trying to tell us." As the Institute erupted into frantic activity around them, Marcus remained at the communication panel, desperately trying to extract more information from the one being who might know what was coming for them all. The small human prodigy was no longer being ridiculed. Now, he might be their only hope for survival. The Institute's command center buzzed with controlled panic as data streamed in from long-range sensors. Marcus stood at a hastily assembled communication station, surrounded by the same researchers who had mocked him days before. Now they hung on his every word as he maintained contact with Echo. "The object is massive," reported Commander Yelnara, the Institute's security chief. Her Andorian features were taut with concern as she studied the holographic displays. Roughly the size of a small moon, but the readings make no sense. It's not reflecting light. It's absorbing it. Echo's been trying to warn us about this for 3 months, Marcus said without taking his attention away from the communication panel. The creature's vocalizations had become increasingly urgent since the alarms began, its patterns more complex than anything Marcus had encountered before. "What exactly is it saying?" Dr. Vashati demanded. The normally composed Centaurian was pacing behind Marcus's station, her 4 eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. Marcus paused in his translation efforts, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air in the command center. It's difficult to convey in standard language. Echo's species understands concepts we don't have words for, but it's describing something that consumes stellar energy directly, something that travels between star systems by feeding on their light. "A stellar parasite," Dr. Chenhai said quietly. "That would explain the absorption readings." "The approaching object has altered course," announced Lieutenant Kexrin from the sensor station. "It's definitely headed for our solar system. Estimated time to star contact: 36 hours. Marcus felt his blood run cold. According to Echo's warnings, once the entity reached a star, it would begin the feeding process that would drain the stellar core within days. Everything in the system would freeze and die. "Echo," Marcus said into the communication array, "we understand the danger. How do we fight it?" The response that came back was a complex symphony of frequencies that conveyed hopelessness and inevitability. Echo's people had tried to fight. They had thrown everything they had at the creature, and they had failed. Their civilization had died screaming in the cold darkness as their sun was consumed. "It says the entity can't be destroyed by conventional weapons," Marcus translated. "Its people tried everything: energy weapons, kinetic bombardments, even antimatter charges. Nothing worked." "Then how do we survive?" Commander Yelnara asked. "If we can't fight it, can we run?" Marcus posed the question to Echo, but the response was even more discouraging. The creature described how the entity could track fleeing ships across interstellar distances, pursuing them until their fuel ran out and leaving them to die in the void. "There has to be something," Dr. Thexmore said. The massive researcher had been uncharacteristically quiet since the crisis began, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine fear. If this creature survived, there must be a way. Marcus asked Echo to explain how it had escaped. The response was long and complex, involving concepts that didn't translate easily into any known language. Marcus struggled to parse the meaning, his mind racing to understand patterns that seemed to shift even as he grasped them. "Echo wasn't supposed to survive," Marcus said finally. "It was on a research vessel studying the entity when the attack began. The ship was caught in some kind of dimensional fold. It's hard to translate. The entity's feeding process creates distortions in space-time." "Dimensional physics," Dr. Creon said excitedly. "The entity's mass would certainly affect local space-time." "If Echo's ship was caught in a distortion field, it was transported here," Marcus continued, following Echo's explanation. "Thrown across space by the entity's feeding process. Echo has been trying to warn anyone who would listen, but no one understood until now." "But that doesn't help us stop this thing," Commander Yelnara protested. Marcus turned back to Echo, desperately searching for any information that might help. The creature's vocalizations had taken on a different tone, more contemplative. It was remembering something. "Echo says its people discovered something in their final days," Marcus said, his voice tight with concentration. "Something about the entity's nature. It's not just a creature that feeds on stellar energy." "What else?" Dr. Vashati demanded. "It's alive in a way we don't understand. It's not just consuming stars. It's absorbing the information contained in the stellar energy, the quantum patterns that govern atomic structure." The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. "It's learning," Dr. Chen-Hai whispered. "Every star it consumes teaches it something new about the universe." Marcus nodded grimly. Echo's people realized that the entity's intelligence grows with every star it feeds on. It's been wandering the galaxy for millions of years, consuming stellar systems and accumulating knowledge. "Then we're not just fighting for our survival," Dr. Vashati said. "We're fighting to prevent it from becoming even more dangerous." "How do Echo's people know all this if they're dead?" Dr. Thexmore asked. Marcus posed the question to Echo, and the response brought tears to his eyes. "Echo wasn't just a survivor," he said quietly. "Echo was their final message to the galaxy. Its mind contains the entire accumulated knowledge of its species, including everything they learned about the entity." "A living library," Dr. Chen-Hai breathed. "No wonder it was so desperate to communicate." "Echo's people encoded everything into its genetic memory before the end," Marcus continued. "Not just warnings about the entity, but also their theoretical work on how to stop it." Every person in the command center leaned forward. "And?" Commander Yelnara prompted. Marcus engaged in a rapid exchange with Echo, the patterns flowing between them faster than he had ever attempted before. The creature was becoming increasingly excited as Marcus demonstrated his growing understanding. "The entity's weakness is the same as its strength," Marcus said. "It absorbs information along with energy. Echo's people theorized that if you could feed it contradictory quantum information, conflicting data that couldn't be resolved, it would cause a processing error," Dr. Kreyan finished, "like overloading a computer with paradoxical calculations." "But how do you feed information to something that large?" Dr. Thexmore asked. Marcus was already working on the problem, his conversation with Echo becoming increasingly technical. The creature was describing quantum information theory at a level that pushed the boundaries of known physics. "Echo's people developed a quantum resonance cascade," Marcus said, "a way to encode paradoxical information into stellar energy itself. If you could modify a star's quantum signature to contain contradictory data, the entity would absorb the corrupted information when it tried to feed," Dr. Vashati said with growing excitement. "But we don't have the technology for stellar modification on that scale." "Yes, we do," Marcus said quietly. "The Institute's Stellar Dynamics Laboratory. We've been using quantum resonance manipulation for smaller-scale experiments for years." Commander Yelnara was already activating communication channels to the laboratory. "Dr. Mordak, we need you in the command center immediately. Bring your entire quantum resonance team." As the laboratory staff arrived, Marcus continued his exchanges with Echo, downloading millions of years of accumulated scientific knowledge through their improvised communication system. The creature seemed to understand the urgency, its vocalizations becoming a constant stream of technical data. "This is impossible," Dr. Mordak protested after Marcus explained what they needed to do. "We've never attempted quantum modification on a stellar scale. The energy requirements alone—" "Echo's providing the theoretical framework," Marcus interrupted, gesturing to his displays. "Its people actually built and tested this technology. We just need to scale it up." "In less than 30 hours, Dr. Thexmore added grimly. The next 20 hours were a blur of frantic activity. The Institute's entire scientific staff worked around the clock to build the quantum resonance array that Echo's genetic memory described. Marcus remained at the communication station, serving as the link between human technology and alien theory. The most challenging part was creating the paradoxical quantum information itself. Echo's people had discovered that certain mathematical constants, when encoded at the quantum level, created unsolvable logical loops. The entity's absorption of such information would be like trying to divide by zero on a cosmic scale. "Resonance array is online," Dr. Mordak reported as the entity appeared at the edge of the solar system. The massive object was already affecting nearby asteroids, pulling matter into itself as it moved toward the sun. Echo says we need to wait until it begins feeding, Marcus said. The quantum cascade will only work when the entity is actively absorbing stellar energy. They watched in horrified fascination as the entity approached their star. Close-up sensors revealed it to be less a creature than a living void. A space-time distortion that bent light and matter around it like a cosmic whirlpool. "It's beginning to feed," announced the sensor operator. "Solar energy output is dropping by 2% and accelerating." "Now," Echo communicated urgently, its patterns sharp with desperate hope. "Initiating quantum cascade," Dr. Mordak announced, "encoding paradoxical information into stellar energy matrix." For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The entity continued its feeding process, and the sun's energy output continued to decline. Marcus began to fear they had failed. Then the entity stopped moving. "It's slowing down," the sensor operator reported in amazement. "The feeding process has halted." Through the communications array, Echo's vocalizations became a triumphant symphony of frequencies. The creature was practically singing with joy. "It's working," Marcus said breathlessly. "The entity is trying to process the contradictory information and can't resolve the paradox." On the main display, they could see the entity beginning to convulse, its perfect spherical shape distorting as it struggled with the impossible data it had absorbed. Energy began to leak from its surface, stellar matter that had been consumed returning to space. "It's releasing everything it absorbed," Dr. Chen-Hai said in wonder. "Not just from our sun, but from previous star systems." The entity's convulsions grew more violent, and suddenly it began to collapse in on itself. The space-time distortion that had given it form was failing, as its consciousness tore itself apart, trying to resolve the unsolvable paradox. "It's working," Commander Yelnara said quietly. "After millions of years, it's finally working." The collapse accelerated, and within minutes, the entity had vanished entirely, leaving only a fading burst of radiation to mark where it had been. The stolen stellar matter dispersed harmlessly into space, enriching the interstellar medium with the accumulated wealth of 1,000 consumed stars. In the sudden quiet that followed, all eyes turned to Marcus, who was still communicating with Echo. The creature's vocalizations had taken on a different quality, something that sounded almost like peace. "What's it saying now?" Dr. Vashati asked gently. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes as he listened. "Echo says its people can finally rest. Their message was delivered, their knowledge preserved. The galaxy is safe. For now," Dr. Thexmore added solemnly. "But thanks to Echo's people and to you, Marcus, we know how to fight such creatures if they ever appear again." In the days that followed, Marcus found himself transformed from ridiculed outsider to the most respected xenolinguist in the Institute. His communication protocols with Echo became the foundation for an entire new field of study, and research teams arrived from across the galaxy to learn from both of them. But perhaps the greatest change was in how his colleagues treated him. Dr. Thexmore, who had been his harshest critic, now sought his advice on complex translation problems. Dr. Kreyan publicly admitted she had been wrong to dismiss his work. Even Kextar, the Zeltharian who had mocked his size and youth, now treated him with genuine respect. "You saved us all," Dr. Chen-Hai said as they watched Echo in its habitat. The creature seemed more content now, its mission fulfilled. "A 17-year-old human boy saved the entire galaxy." Marcus smiled, but his attention was focused on Echo's latest communication. The creature was describing the locations of other survivor refugees scattered across space, beings who carried the knowledge and history of civilizations long thought lost. "The real work is just beginning," Marcus said. "Echo's shown us that we're not alone in the universe. There are others out there, other survivors with stories to tell and knowledge to share." He turned to face his colleague, his eyes bright with possibility. We're going to need bigger translation matrices. As Marcus returned to his communication with Echo, the ridicule and doubt of his early days at the Institute seemed like a distant memory. He had proven that size and age meant nothing when it came to understanding and bridging the gaps between species. The small human prodigy had become the voice that connected worlds, and the universe was listening.